Welcome to Communicate to Lead, the podcast that empowers leaders and aspiring leaders to communicate with clarity and impact. I'm Kele Belton, CEO and successful entrepreneur, and your host for today. I'm here to equip you with all the essential tools and strategies to master effective communication and lead your team to success. As the founder and CEO of The Tailored Approach, my goal is to empower you to be the best leader you can be. So sit back, relax, and join me in today's episode as we dive into the art of communicating like a true leader. Have you ever poured your heart and soul into supporting someone, only to feel like your empathy backfired? Maybe a team member continued to underperform despite your understanding of their personal struggles. Or a difficult conversation blew up in your face even though you tried your very best to see the other person's perspective. If that sounds familiar, you're in the right place. Welcome back to Communicate to Lead, the podcast where we equip women leaders like you with the communication skills to navigate challenges, build influence, and achieve extraordinary results. I'm your host, Kele Belton. Today, we're diving into a topic that has been recurring in recent coaching conversations: when empathy is not enough. But before you hit the stop button, hear me out. Empathy is absolutely crucial for effective leadership. It allows us to connect with our teams, understand their perspectives, build trust, and create a more inclusive and supportive work environment. But here's the thing. Empathy is just one piece of the puzzle. It's a powerful tool, but it can't be the only tool in your leadership toolbox. In this episode, we'll explore the potential pitfalls of over-relying on empathy, and more importantly, I'll share practical strategies to help you strike the right balance between compassion and effective leadership. Okay, so we've established that empathy is important. But let's get real about why leaning too heavily on it can sometimes backfire. Think of it this way. Have you ever had a friend call you, completely distraught and venting about their problems for hours on end? You listen, you offer support, and try to put yourself in their shoes. And by the end of the conversation, you feel completely drained. If you are an introvert, you can probably relate to this. That's what can happen when we overemphasize empathy in our leadership roles. We become so focused on understanding and absorbing everyone else's emotions that we end up carrying their burdens along with our own. It's like we become emotional sponges, soaking up all the stress, anxiety, and negativity around us. And let me tell you, that is a recipe for burnout. We end up with little energy for ourselves, our families, or leading effectively. Another challenge is that an overabundance of empathy can blur our boundaries. We might find ourselves saying yes to requests we should have declined, taking on extra work that isn't ours to do, or constantly bending over backward to accommodate others. And while that might seem kind in the short term, it can actually create resentment and prevent us from being able to hold others accountable. If you're always rescuing people from the consequences of their actions, they never learn to take responsibility for their own growth and development. Because after all, you are there to clean up the mess. You are there to rescue them when they need you. And here's another sneaky way that over-relying on empathy can trip us up. Indecision. We get so caught up in considering every single perspective, every possible outcome, every potential hurt feeling that we end up paralyzed. We overthink, we second guess ourselves, and we struggle to make timely decisions. And sometimes, let's be honest, we avoid those tough conversations altogether, even when they're absolutely necessary, because we're so afraid of hurting someone's feelings. But here's the thing. Sometimes the most empathetic thing we can do is to set clear boundaries, hold people accountable, and make those tough decisions, even when it feels uncomfortable. Because it's about balancing compassion with the courage to do what's right for the team, the organization, and ultimately for the individuals themselves. So, if empathy alone is not enough, what else do we need? Well, here are a few essential tools to add to your leadership arsenal. First up, assertive communication. This is about more than simply speaking your mind. It's about clearly and confidently expressing your needs, your expectations, and boundaries, even when uncomfortable. It's about advocating for yourself, your team, and your ideas while respecting others. Assertive communication isn't aggressive or demanding. It's about finding that sweet spot where you can be direct, honest, and respectful all at the same time. Next, we need strategic thinking. This means zooming out and looking beyond the immediate situation. It's about connecting the dots between individual actions, team goals, and the overall objectives of our organization. Ask yourself, how do my decisions and actions contribute to the bigger picture? Strategic thinking helps us prioritize, allocate resources effectively, and make choices that align with our long-term vision. Boundary setting is another crucial tool. Think of your boundaries as your personal fence. They define what you're willing to tolerate and what you're not. This means protecting your time, energy, and emotional well-being. And it also means creating a healthy work environment where everyone feels respected, supported, and safe to speak their minds. And let's not forget about accountability. This means providing constructive feedback, both positive and negative, and ensuring there are consequences for underperformance, even when you empathize with the reasons behind it. Now, I know this can be tough because I know it from experience. I've seen it with my own clients, especially for those of us who are naturally empathetic. But keep this in mind. Holding people accountable isn't about being mean or punitive. It's about helping them learn, grow, and reach their full potential. Finally, we need decisiveness. As leaders, we're often called upon to make tough calls, sometimes with incomplete information or conflicting perspectives. Decisiveness isn't about being impulsive or making decisions quickly. It's about gathering the necessary information, weighing the options, and then making a timely decision with the information that you have and moving on. Think of these tools that we just discussed, and I'll mention them again: assertive communication, strategic thinking, boundary setting, accountability, and decisiveness. Think of these tools as different lenses through which you can view your leadership challenges. By integrating them with your natural empathy, you'll be able to navigate complex situations with greater confidence, clarity, and effectiveness. Okay, let's make this even more practical with a few real-world examples. Imagine you have a team member, let's call her Jane, who consistently misses deadlines. As an empathetic leader, you take the time to understand her situation. Maybe she's dealing with a personal crisis, juggling childcare responsibilities, or feeling overwhelmed by her workload. You genuinely care about her well-being and want to be supportive. But here's the catch. Jane's missed deadlines are starting to impact the rest of the team. Projects are getting delayed, clients are getting frustrated, and other team members have to pick up the slack. This is where balancing empathy with other leadership skills become important. Yes, you can leverage your empathy to understand Jane's challenges, but you also need to set clear expectations, hold her accountable, and potentially have a difficult conversation about the consequences of her actions. This might involve clearly communicating the impact of her missed deadlines. You could say something like, Jane, I understand you're going through a tough time right now, but when you miss deadlines, it's creating a ripple effect that impacts the entire team and our clients. You could reiterate expectations and offer support. And here's an example of how to say that. I need you to meet these deadlines. Are there any resources or adjustments we can make to help you succeed? And lastly, you could explore potential consequences with the following statement. If the deadlines continue to be missed, we may need to reevaluate your role on this particular project. And there you have 3 examples. And it's not about being harsh or uncaring. It's about balancing compassion with the responsibility of leading the team effectively. Here's another scenario. Let's say you're dealing with a conflict between 2 team members, John and David. They are consistently and constantly butting heads, and the communication has become passive-aggressive, creating a toxic atmosphere in the office. Again, empathy plays a big role here, without a doubt. You can use your empathy to understand each person's perspective, their frustrations, and their underlying needs. But to resolve the conflict effectively, you need to go beyond empathy and 1, facilitate a constructive conversation. Bring John and David together, create a safe space for them to express their concerns, and ensure the conversation stays respectful and stays productive. Number 2, set ground rules. Establish clear expectations for communication and behavior, emphasizing the importance of collaboration and mutual respect. And lastly, number 3, help them find a solution. Guide them toward a solution that addresses both their needs and benefits the team as a whole. This might involve compromise, finding common ground, or even redefining their roles to minimize friction. By combining empathy with these other leadership skills, you can transform potential damaging situations into opportunities for growth, learning, and improved team dynamics. All right, that was a mouthful. So let's take a moment to recap the key takeaways from today's episode. First and foremost, we've established that empathy is a valuable leadership trait. There's no argument there. It's something that we need. It helps us to be better leaders. It allows us to connect with our teams, understand their perspectives, and create a more supportive and inclusive work environment. But the crucial point here is that empathy is not a magic bullet. It's not the sole solution to every leadership challenge. In order to be effective leaders, we need to balance compassion with other essential skills. Empathy is the heart of leadership, but it needs to be supported by the head, by strategic thinking, assertive communication, boundary setting, accountability, and decisiveness. Now, here's your call to action for this week. Take a few minutes to reflect on a recent situation where empathy alone wasn't enough. Maybe you felt burnt out after taking on too much of someone else's emotional burden, or perhaps you struggled to set a boundary, or you avoided a difficult conversation that needed to happen. Once you have identified that situation, ask yourself the following question. How could I have applied one of these tools we discussed today to achieve a better outcome? Number 1, could you have communicated more assertively? Perhaps you could have expressed your needs or expectations more clearly and confidently. 2, could you have set a clearer boundary? Maybe it was time to say no to a request or protect your time and energy. 3, could you have held someone accountable? Maybe it was time to provide constructive feedback or address underperformance. 4, could you have made a more decisive decision? Maybe it was time to stop overthinking and start taking action. Whatever that looks like for you, whatever situation you have come up with, I encourage you to take that first step. Start small. Practice setting a boundary with a colleague. Plan a difficult conversation using assertive communication techniques, or simply take some time to reflect on your own needs and boundaries. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you already know that leadership is a journey, not a destination. It's about continuous growth and learning. And by embracing the full spectrum of leadership skills, you can create positive change, empower your teams, and achieve extraordinary results. Women leaders have the unique ability to lead with both heart and head. By embracing the full spectrum of our leadership skills, we can create positive change and we can empower our teams and get the results that we want and need. Thank you so much for listening and joining me on Communicate to Lead. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your network, subscribe to the podcast, and leave a review. And remember, your voice matters, your leadership matters, and I'm here to support you every step of the way. Until next time, my friend, I am Kele, reminding you that great communication is the foundation of inspiring leadership. Keep learning, keep growing, and remember to communicate to lead.